Elle is a native of Madison, South Dakota. She graduated from Augustana in 1991, attended Creighton University School of Law. This is a long list. She has served on the board of directors of the Great Plains Zoo and is now president of the merged boards of the Sioux Falls Zoo and Aquarium. She's on the Sculpture Walk Board of Directors and the Augie Board of Trustees. I'm not going to read the whole list. I'll just tell you she is also president of Sioux Falls West Rotary, and we welcome her to talk about the South Dakota Open Primaries Initiative. Please join me in welcoming Janelle.
Like you said, I'm here to talk about South Dakota open primaries. It's a petition, and we have some up here if you're so interested later, to put open primaries on the South Dakota ballot. First, just let me say, as president of Sioux Falls Rotary West, it's really fun to come to another Rotary meeting and see how you guys do things. Our fining system's a little different, but I might add some trivia to our fine system next time, because that was kind of fun. I'm going to start with a little video about that kind of defines the problem that open primaries try to fix.
This is a snapshot of America. And there's some folks on the far left and some on the far right. But most of us are somewhere in between. Now this is our Congress. They're becoming so divided and so extreme that working together to solve problems seems impossible. Which explains why the last Congress had a ridiculously low approval rating of just 20%. But somehow, 95% of them got re-elected, which begs some big questions. The answer is because our representatives literally don't represent us. Because most of us don't elect them. Buckle up and we'll explain. Most of our voting happens in the general election, so we assume that's the election that matters. But it's not that simple. Today, 83% of congressional districts are so Democratic or so Republican that they're considered blocked for one party or the other. And whichever party has a lock on the district will always have the winning candidate. So the general election is over before it even begins. That means the only election that actually matters is the one where each party picks their candidate. And that happens in the primary election. And here's the even bigger problem. Participation in primary elections is extremely low. And the voters that do participate tend to be the most partisan and the most ideologically extreme. The result is a small, often extreme minority of voters wind up deciding the vast majority of our elections. And that's how we keep getting divided and dysfunctional Congress that fails to represent we, the people. Take 2020. Despite a record turnout in the general election, only 10% of all voters cast ballots in primaries. That effectively decided 83% of our congressional seats. Just 10%. This is the problem with partisan primaries. And it's the primary problem of our politics today. They create a system where hundreds of lawmakers only have to answer to the small, extreme base that elects and re-elects them. And the rest of us, the majority of us, don't matter. And neither do the problems we care about. The solution is actually simple. Our Constitution gives every state the freedom to replace their partisan primaries with a single, non-partisan primary. This will allow all voters to have the ability to support whichever candidate they want, regardless of party. The top finishers then advance to the general election where whoever earns a majority of votes wins. Several states have already adopted nonpartisan primaries, from Alaska to California. We just need more to follow. Together, we can fix the primary problem and put voters first. We can have a Congress that actually represents us and solves the problems we care about.
Okay, let's see if I can get back to my PowerPoint. There we go. Nope.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay. There we go. Thank you. You know, and it isn't news to anybody. This is a Washington Post article kind of explaining why, another reason why Congress is so polarized and people aren't cooperating is they're afraid of being, quote, primaried in their own election. So if they cooperate with the other side, they're afraid that somebody more extreme in their party will then run against them in the primary because they dared to cooperate with somebody else. So the Washington Post in 2022 did a long series about that. And people that have had, even if the primary person running against them in the primary didn't win, they know that that's a risk for them, and they tend to not be willing to co-sponsor legislation with someone from the other party because they're afraid of the risk of being primaried when they get back home. An increase in those primary challenges is what really leads to the polarized behavior that we have. So, a nonpartisan primary can solve the primary problem, and that's what we want to do right here in South Dakota. Nonpartisan primaries give every voter an equal voice and increase participation rates, produce more representative outcomes, and held our leaders accountable to all of the voters. One recent study found that among new members of Congress elected between 2003 and 18, if they were elected in a nonpartisan primary, they were 18 percentage points less extreme than those elected in closed primaries. So, South Dakota Open's primaries theme is let all voters vote. Open Primaries is a nonpartisan group. The three leaders that signed our petition to get it started are Joe Kirby, who's a registered Republican and fourth-generation South Dakotan, Dee Knudsen, who's a former member of the Sioux Falls City Council, Tom Dempster, a former Republican elected official who served for 9 years in County Commission, and Dre Samuelson, the former Chief of Staff for the U.S. Senator Tim Johnson. Our 2024 proposal and ballot initiative gives voters in 2024 a chance to change the state's constitution. So for the offices of governor, all legislative offices, all county offices, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, we would have a nonpartisan primary. And what that means is you have one election where everybody from every party is on the ballot in the primary. And every voter, no matter whether they're a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, a libertarian, a communist, they can vote in that election. And the top two vote getters in that election are the ones that go on to the general election, and then the general election picks among those top two vote getters from the nonpartisan primary. And that's in comparison to the system we currently have, where each party runs their own primary. The Democrats in the state do let independents vote in their primary, the Republicans do not. And I don't think it's news to any of you that in this state, it's really the Republican primary that matters. And right now in this state, independent voters actually outnumber Democratic voters. So we have a large swath of independent voters in this state that aren't able to participate in choosing who is going to be on that general election ballot. We believe all registered voters should be able to vote. And that's what happens with a top two open primary. All candidates for office in the June primary are on the election, and all registered voters get to vote. The candidates can list their party preference on there. So if I run as a Republican, it's going to be indicated on the ballot that I am running as a Republican. They can choose to be unaffiliated. But the two that get the most votes are the ones that move ahead to the election in November. The number of overall in the United States, independent or unaffiliated voters, is close to 45% right now. And independent voters often have little say in who will represent them, in especially the South Dakota legislature. And most importantly, everybody pays for the primary election. Everybody pays taxes for party primaries to be run right now. And 148,000 registered voters, even though they're paying for those elections, can't vote right now in those elections. And many states have some form of open primaries. The form that we're suggesting has been adopted in Alaska, California, and Nebraska. So it's not something that a bunch of crazy people in Sioux Falls came up with. This is a common election reform, and some states have been operating that way for years. And again, I already mentioned this, public funds are used to pay for primary elections. And it's not fair that those elections that everyone is paying for can't be, have everyone involved in them. And especially in South Dakota, the primary election is generally the election that's more important than the other elections. In 2022, 86% of the legislative elections were uncontested. So that means by the time you got to the general election, there was only one person listed on that ballot. A disappointing 21 of 35 state Senate seats were uncontested. So the majority of our state Senate didn't have anybody running against them in the general election. And there's nothing competitive about that. Party-run primaries tend to promote partisanship and reward party loyalty. And I think you've all seen it. We're a country that's more divided than ever. And that's, again, because the incentive is to not cooperate because you know somebody from the more extreme of whatever party you run in are involved with will run against you if you tend to cooperate or moderate. And because of the closed primary system we have across this country, it tends to be the party loyalists that are showing up in those elections. So primary elections are usually not very well attended. So we often do, like the video said, have elections where only 10% of the electorate is actually the people that are deciding who's going to be our representatives. We feel like, we realize South Dakota is a conservative state, but we believe that this is part of South Dakota conservative values. It's a matter of fairness, it's a matter of competition, and it allows more people to be involved in the election process here. And we believe that everybody benefits when our elections are competitive and the candidates actually try to appeal to all of the voters, not just the most extreme of their party. And it's not a partisan issue. Like I said, the people that primarily will benefit from this are independent voters who are shut out of the system right now. And where this has been adopted, it hasn't changed the political makeup. We have heard that this is some plot by the Democrats in the state to wrest control back from the Republicans, and that's just not true. South Dakota is going to stay a red state when this is adopted, but it might be just a slightly more moderate red state. We might have people where the majority of the people are more moderate, they might have more representation by the candidate that they ultimately get to select. And it actually increases voter turnout. Hopefully, if you decide to sign a petition, you'll get one of these little fiscal notes from the Attorney General that explains what the constitutional amendment will do. And I think the fiscal note is very important here because the fiscal note indicates that it will cost the taxpayers another $23,667 to adopt open primaries. And the reason that they think that'll be the increase is because they're going to have to print more ballots at 47 cents a piece. I think that's a good thing. We're going to have more people voting according to the Attorney General's opinion if this passes. And that can only be good for everybody. And in the states such as Alaska and California, there's been a 3% increase in voter turnout once they've adopted open primaries. So, Mr. Hines is with me. You wanted to also state why you support this petition.
I gave a very good overview as to why I came on board with South Dakota open primaries. You refresh my memory, if you will. Good afternoon, everyone. I know many of you in the room, but for those that I don't, I'm Tom Hines. business owner from Dakota Dunes. I first became a supporter of South Dakota open primaries a couple years ago after reading Joe Kirby's op-ed in the Rapid City Journal, where he talked about how our legislative sessions were often elevating issues that mattered to a few above issues such as education, economic development, health care, infrastructure improvements, and other projects designed to make our state better that were often either neglected or pushed into the last 2 or 3 days of the session. As Janelle's presentation mentioned, we currently have many uncontested contests that we need, so we need a better system for hiring the people that govern us. Open primaries harm no one. According to the mayor of Tulsa, Oklahoma, G.T. Bynum, the main people opposed to open primaries are the professional political class who draw their livelihood and identity from partisan politics. For the average person like yourself and me, open primaries make all the sense in the world. As the mayor says, is it going to fix everything in our state in a year or two? No. But it does introduce more competition, which incentivizes people to listen and appeal to a broader range of perspectives than they must right now, where their candidates are protected through a monopolistic closed system it's not our expectation for open primaries to fix everything. As Kirby had noted in his op-ed, monopolies, whether they're economical or political, never favor citizens. Just like the marketplace without competition, our politics, there are no incentives to be responsive to public opinion. The results are stagnation, dysfunction, not innovation. To ensure that our business remains sustainable for our children and grandchildren, we continue reinvesting. Similarly, I view my investment in South Dakota open primaries equally important, assuring that South Dakota's future is more creative, more productive, and has a stronger government by including more people in the legislative process, both candidates and voters. Our business, like South Dakota's continued prosperity, is contingent upon slowing the outward migration of our brightest and energetic upon their graduation. Our existing political and cultural landscape does not allow all voices to be heard. As Janelle's presentation mentioned, in South Dakota today there's 148,000 and growing registered independent voters, and I'm one of those. I don't have much of a voice when it comes. I pay a lot of tax dollars throughout the state of South Dakota. I have very little voice in how it's spent. Open primaries are that first step in sending the message that all voters' voices are welcome here. Again, the number of signatures we have on petitions today are in that 42,000 range. Our goal is 50,000 because we need 35,516, I think, valid ones. But our goal is 50,000, so we have some that aren't going to get validated. So for those of you that have not signed our petition, hopefully you will do so before you leave here today, so we can get this on the ballot in 2024 and let all the voters make a choice on if they don't agree that we should be coming up with a new way of hiring the people that govern us. Equally important, our Treasurer Dee Knudsen would scold me if I did not make you make the ask for financial support as well. We're pretty well covered as far as getting our petitions, the number of petitions we needed signed, but we've got a long way to go from the financial standpoint to get this across the goal line in 2024 to get it passed in the general election. So with that, again, thank you very much. And we have the petitions here, so hopefully you'll help us out and sign them if you haven't.
Kevin said we were supposed to stop at 10 to 1, which we did, because there might be questions. So happy to answer any questions you may have. Yeah.
As I understand it, this is a constitutional amendment that you're proposing,
Correct.
and that means that the legislature cannot change it
Correct.
if it's adopted. Only the people can change it.
Correct.
And I think that's important to note that. And it also affects any partisan office right down to the county level. Is that correct?
No.
No.
No, it's only states. It's only the state parties.
State legislators do, right?
Yeah, state legislators.
County commissioners are not involved,
No.
correct?
But the legislature can change it, to my knowledge. I mean, the legislature can adopt it so they can, so it can cover
Yeah.
all.
Constitution, I don't know that they can.
They can expand on it, they just can't retract it.
Okay, well,
I think it's, I mean, I might misunderstood what you're asking me.
Well-
Hang on.
somewhere in here it says,
In the presentation, it did say county.
Yeah, county office, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you're saying, yes.
county official.
Yes.
Elected county official
Elected county officials, yes.
process.
But like a city of Sioux Falls still runs its own election, and I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, yes,
Not partisan, so they-
yes. Yes, in the back?
So is it just the top two vote getters? We don't have then like a runoff, and I think Louisiana does that, where they have the general primaries.
Yeah, no, we don't do the runoff. The top two go through. In the legislative districts where you're electing two, the top four would go through to the general. Yes?
So this says elected county officials, but what about the constitutional officers?
The constitutional officers are currently elected, well, not all of them, but are you talking about the ones that are elected at yeah. It does not affect those. Those are still going to be run through the convention system because that's,
Some discussion about selecting them at a primary rather than a party.
yeah, that was a bill that was introduced this year, but it didn't pass. Certainly, even though it's a constitutional amendment, a legislator is always able to add to it. They just can't take it away once it's enshrined in the Constitution. I mean, obviously, we would encourage those selections to not be made at a party convention. We think it would be more fair to have those elected, but we're also restrained by this single issue ballot that disqualified the legalization of marijuana. We can only have one issue per ballot measure, and so that would be a separate change. So we're changing the ones that are elected with a primary election currently. So if you're elected through a primary, that's what would change, but if you're elected at one of those conventions, that's not going to change. Any other questions? Yeah, yeah.
One comment, a real life situation, not to call you out, Art, but, if you see the way that this functions in reality, we had nearly this happen in our very district, where we had been well represented, I believe, even those of us that are a bit further left than Senator Rush felt we were being well represented. And then because, of being moderate and cooperative, Art got primary from the right, and it nearly, was a very, very close primary election. But then in the general election, almost always got a very large portion of the vote. So I think that's a really great example of where our district definitely wanted this person to represent us, but because of, being somewhat, open to cooperation and moderation, nearly lost that person as our representative. And so I think that that's just a real world example of where that's happened in our very district. And it's, it's a dangerous thing because I don't think that that would have been what's best for district.
Yeah, I don't, my feeling is generally people want our politicians to cooperate and get things done. But it doesn't, and we have a system that disincentivizes that.
Glenn, last question.
Yeah, is anybody working on ranked choice voting, or will this kind of cover it up?
Well, you maybe remember me being here about a year and a half ago, and I talked to you guys about ranked choice voting. We were working on it, but open primaries first, and then maybe we can get ranked choice voting going again. But we think this is an important first step. Of course, the legislature did, after I talked to you all, vote to ban ranked choice voting, so no municipal elections can have it. So I don't mean that I come here and it's the kiss of death for something, but hopefully that won't happen again.
Well, thank you very much. I saw a couple of hands up, but I do want to let you know that Tom and Janelle are going to stay after a moment to collect signatures, and I'm sure they would be happy to answer your questions. All right. Well, it was good to see you. Thank you, guests, for coming. Glenn, good to see you again. Good to see you again. Sitting next to our other guest, Officer Campbell. And Aaron. Am I right? Aaron, there you go. Welcome. So if people wanted to ask about the BSA, which, by the way, they used to make a fine small motorcycle, BSA did. Do you guys remember those? Anyway, you'll be here also, Aaron, for a few minutes if you want to talk to him. Good. Thank you very much. Next week, Adam Chandler is going to, from First Dakota, is going to talk about their fraud team, fraud prevention team, I should say. Okay, it's important to get that. So we'll look to see you then. Janelle, we trust you. You can go with me with our hat or 50-50.
Chase the ace, though. You do chase the ace. Chris Casson.
Oh, too bad.
Okay.
All right. So if you'd care to join me, and Joe, if you'll lead us in our closeout song. My country is a big, sweet land of liberty, of the I sing. Land where my fathers died, land
Shamrock with the cutout of the plate. The Irish, basically honey tapping all Machine politics work. Corn, cabins in every pot. Right.